podcast. I am your host, TJ Legacy. And what a relevant song by my co-host, Alan York. What's going on all the way from New York? What's going on, man?
I'm glad to be here. It's a lot going on. Blessed to share this platform with y'all.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, but we have some heavyweights today on this panel. No disrespect to the people we've had on the podcast before, but these are the folks that are really my go-to people, right? And some day ones. And I'm gonna start with Latino radio host. What is it? 92.3 Exion?
97.9.
97.9. I'm sorry. 97.9.
No, that's fine. iHeartRadio right here in Orlando.
iHeartRadio. Yes.
Thanks for having us. And hopefully we can learn a lot from each other. I've got a lot of Latinos that are listening and watching, and I'm sure they're going to want to chime in on what's going on. So thanks for having me, TJ. Yeah. And to all the rest of the panel, thanks for letting me be a part of this today.
Yeah, not a problem. Just wanted to let everybody know, when I started doing my Facebook live shows before I did the actual Soapboxx, it was just Soapboxx Sundays that I used to do from my little phone in my apartment. Peter was my first guest. So, to see the growth and to see the fact that he's back here, I appreciate your insight. We may not always agree, but I do appreciate your insight and your commentary on issues. I want to start off with, she's a friend of the show. She's been on the show before as well. A shero of mine, Attorney-Natalie Jackson. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, TJ. I was so proud of you today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, for all the new folks who are watching the podcast, appreciate that, because we went live today from Windermere, and we'll definitely discuss that as well. Another brother that's been a friend of the show, Attorney-Camara Williams. Is that the same liquor from last week, from the last time?
I don't remember. I don't know what I drank last week.
It was you said it was like a black owned.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Attorney-Camara Williams, brother that gives great insight, great commentary. If you follow him on Facebook, a lot of written knowledge that he displays on his Facebook. So make sure he's a good follow. So welcome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me, man. It's a blessing.
Yep. And then we also have a friend of the show. It's even though he is a candidate and he is running for something, he just happens to be running for something. But Attorney Andrew Darling has been on the show before. I appreciate you. He's extremely accessible to me to give insight. So I appreciate you being on the podcast today to talk about what's going on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me back. Last time you guys were convincing me to jump back in this race, and here we are.
Yes, I was giving him a lot of crap because I said former candidate, but now he's a current candidate, Andrew Darling. And I just want to say before I start, because I need to address something, because I'm kind of on one today. And as you guys know, Soapboxx is uncensored, unfiltered, and unscripted. So I've had some candidates reach out to me today and talk to me about why are they invited onto the panel tonight. First of all, everybody that you see on this panel has been on or been involved with me in the things that I'm doing, whether it's social justice, anything that I'm doing outside of my podcast in real life, like from day one. Okay. And so just because someone is on my podcast that happens to be running for the sheriff, I think that's a good thing. So he's afforded the opportunity to have that platform. So whether you're John Mina or any of these other people that are running for Orange County Sheriff, you're more than welcome. If you decide to have a conversation with me, you're more than welcome to have a conversation with me. I'm accessible. But this is Andrew's spot because he's earned it. So there's that. Anyway, moving on. Lot to talk about. I want to start with the Amy Cooper situation. Can we start with that? Sure. Everybody good with that? I want to play the video and then I want to get everyone's initial reaction to it. Share the screen.
Please don't come close to me.
I'm taking pictures calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Oh, I hate that.
Knock, knock.
These little
Hello?
commercials.
Oh,
Give me one
there
second,
you are.
y'all.
Seems you've been.
Would you please stop? Sir, I'm asking you to stop.
Please don't come close to me.
Sir, I'm asking you to stop recording me.
Please don't come close to me.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to
And I'm
me.
taking a picture and calling the cops.
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I'm in the Ramble, and there is a man, African American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the Ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the Ramble. I don't know.
Thank you.
Attorney Jackson, Natalie, what was your first initial reaction when you saw that video when it went viral?
Disgust. She was weaponizing his skin color, and that was my first thought. Was once again, the skin color in the race of someone is being weaponized against them and a Black man.
Yeah, it seemed, honestly, it like, to me, it's every African American man's experience or the risk that we take when we leave the house. Peter, let me go to you. When you first, what was your? I want to get everybody's initial reaction to that video. What was yours?
It's funny because I was reading an article today. I think it was the New York Times or what. Somebody was writing today about this, and they said this is the white woman that your Black mama warned you about. This is the one, and it was really an interesting article that they put together. But when I saw this first, I was like, of course the media always blows everything out of proportion without knowing the truth behind the story. They just showed one end. But when you see this gentleman, this well-educated African-American man, just like, do what you have to do. I know that I'm doing what's right. And everything else that's combined to it, I just could not believe that this is going on. And, I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. So, just to see this kind of stuff going on, even in the city where you would think this is done, this is over with, it's just unacceptable, and of course I cannot, and first off, I'll apologize to everybody on this panel. I can't put myself in an African-American shoes because I'm not Black. So I can't go out there and say, I have that issue. I have other issues because as a Latino, obviously there's other issues that we deal with, but to know that this kind of thing happens daily, just to see that, my eyes have been even more opened up than ever before to see what actually the plight and what is going on when it comes to the everyday life. And I don't know what it's, again, I wouldn't know what it's like because of my skin color, but at least I could see right now that there's so much out there that's, like, I think Natalie said it well, weaponizing. And that's something that, when you see a video like this, you understand that this is not going to stop. I mean, this is something that actually has to be brought to the forefront. And it's a whole new, for me, it opened my eyes to a whole different world that I hadn't seen before. And then obviously we'll talk about the George Floyd issue afterwards, but kind of like you see a sequence of things that kind of like, all right, stop, let's stop and breathe and figure this thing out and work together to see what we can do. But it was appalling to see that this woman would actually accuse this man when you plain as day that nothing was going on. Thank God for the video. That's all I could say.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that as far as the fact that he had video. And I want to say this: when I first saw this video, the first person I actually thought about was you, Kamar. And the reason was because I was like, wait a minute, Kamar is a well-educated Black man. But if you close your eyes and you listen to the audio, someone would really can paint you, because of your skin color and your pigmentation, can paint you as a criminal or someone who's being the aggressor. Speak to the intrinsic fear that we as Black males, have to face, whether you're educated or your social status.
Right. And before you start, Kamar, I just want to say, we talk about the well-educated Black man. You don't have to be well-educated to be protected from the situation and to be appalled about this situation. So many times Black people are put in a position where we have to be perfect. We have to be educated. We have to be the classy person and the fly high people to even be thought of deserving justice. And that in itself has to stop.
Yes, I agree.
So it's great that Attorney Jackson, I was going to say Natalie because we're friends, but
this is informal. I felt weird saying attorney this, like we all know you guys all have great titles. I'm the low end of the totem pole. Go ahead.
No, that's far from true. So, first I want to say thank you for bringing that up about, I think we get caught up in the respectability of the victim, and the media or this society. We look at, well, who was the victim? What was their history? How did they operate? And it's like, well, no, wrong is wrong, right is right. And we don't evaluate somebody on the spectrum of how we deem them to be, respectable. And I like to joke with my friends, respectability politics went out in 2016. Like, you still on that? And so so I want to, always highlight that even if he, I'm from Brooklyn, so even if he, came up from the old Bed-Stuy, not the new Bed-Stuy, because the new Bed-Stuy is, is it's whole different, right? But the old Bed-Stuy, or East New York, where still a lot of my family reside, but that's still very much East New York over there. And they talk like whether like some of my cousins or uncles or whatnot. I mean, he would still be, he still allowed the respect and dignity that she wasn't giving him. But I do want to highlight though, there's this thing that we're seeing all the way from the White House to Amy Cooper of weaponizing whiteness. This strain of weaponizing whiteness in society, and from everybody's had an Amy Cooper situation professionally or personally, right?
Yes.
It's the person who she raises her voice and she describes victimhood in the sense of, this person was being aggressive. They're talking too loud to me. I didn't like their attitude, and so therefore I'm not going to promote them on their job, or I'm not going to give them this opportunity, or so forth and so on. And what she was doing is weaponizing her whiteness in order to incur a response from the police, which was very dangerous. You see on the other end of the spectrum, you saw Trump weaponizing whiteness when he made the statement of if they're looting, shooting, right? And so it's these dog whistle things of weaponizing key terms. Just like in our Blackness, we can say certain things or in a crowded room, and it's like, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? It's It's like, I get it. That other people may not get. It's the dog whistles of our cultural, right? That is what was happening. And I'm saying the same thing. I'm sure in the Hispanic community, there's certain things, right? You may say that like, oh, okay, they may not have gotten it, but on the frequency of Hispanic brother and sister, they may understand exactly what I was referring to. Coded language, right? So the weaponizing of whiteness was coded within that phone call, from her inflection of her voice, right, to the context of he's an African American male and he's coming in and he's attacking me, right? Yeah. And and I'm in Rambo in Central Park. She used very key words to get a response, and we know the context of like the Central Park or the exonerated 5, very key words in order to harm this person and get a response out of the police. That's what I'll say about that.
Yes, and before I toss it over to you, Andrew, I definitely want to talk to Alan. Alan, you are in New York, so what was the temperature of the streets when these videos go viral? There's been a lot of things that have been going on in New York. We've seen police brutality been rampant with the COVID-19 and enforcing these social distancing orders in New York. What's the temperature like in New York, especially with this type of video that went viral?
Well, we kind of, just because of so many things that have happened to us in Central Park, we have a very strange relationship with the park, right? So when these things do happen, it is definitely kind of like another walk in the park. Like those Central Park is kind of, in a sense, to a lot of us, like haunted. Like you never really know what can happen when you go in there. So that
you may not come out.
Sorry?
You may not come out.
Yeah, I mean, well, that, or
it's
if
a
you
scary
come out with
thought.
a charge that's not yours, or it's just so many things that can happen, and not even just outside of police brutality or just the relationship between minorities and Anglo-Saxons, or also it's dangerous too at night. So you just really never know what's going on when you go into Central Park. So our relationship is a little weird. As far as that video is concerned, that the first thing that I picked up on instantaneously just was the language. Like he said, it was a dog whistle. It was very specific type of way that she spoke. The tone in her voice, she knew exactly what was going on, and he knew exactly what was going on as well. So unfortunately, it was like, to me, it was like, oh, this is kind of on brand.
To me, that it goes back to that whole, believability. There's been a movement, of saying believe all women. But when it comes to systemic racism, it's never believe all Black people when it comes to our experiences in this country. Andrew, I want to turn to you. You've been a public in the public defense office, a public defender, and you're also a father of interracial children. So what do you, in these type of situations, they kind of hit, I know they kind of hit differently with you, being a white man and having interracial children and dealing with the judicial system. So how did this land for you?
So it's the way I do my best to oftentimes try to explain to other white people what the problems are with not just coded language, but with perception, with when you come to a scenario with another person who happens to be Black or who happens to be Hispanic, you might come to it with your own baggage, but they're going to have baggage of times when people were using coded language against them. You're going to have times, not just microaggressions, you're going to have times when folks have seen outright racism and nobody was around to step up. Nobody was around to say anything. As soon as I saw the video, it wasn't even her comfort with calling police. It wasn't even her comfort with, I don't know what the heck she was doing with her dog, but a minor inconvenience of somebody telling you, put a leash on your dog, a leash that you're already supposed to have on your dog. And that minor inconvenience, and the part for me, the worst part of the video is when she first calls and she's like, yeah, there's this African-American man. And then when the person on the phone is not taking her seriously, like she raises her voice as if there's an imminent threat, as if it's right now. And it's like, I don't get it. Like, maybe it's because I'm just not scared of Black people. Like, I don't know, like, and a lot of white folks are, and I don't understand. I understand if you've never been around Black people, if you've never, it's not even having Black friends, it's just being comfortable with people who are not the same as you. And that's okay. Like, you can celebrate somebody else's Blackness. You don't have to be Black to celebrate somebody else's Blackness. And for me, growing up, I grew up with a lot of Black people, with mostly Black people. And my son, like, I can teach him to be a man. I can't teach him to be a Black man. So I have friends, I have mentors of mine who I am very intentionally keeping around my son, because there are things that they're going to be able to teach him that I simply can't. And that's real, and I understand it. But it was that voice inflection, like that, like the anger that put in me. That was the worst part for me.
Well, I think there's a differentiation between, and that people need to understand, of like, there's white privilege, to my estimation, that I believe white people have inherited white privilege. And then there's also what we're seeing now, that you're talking about those aggressions, white arrogance. It was almost like, hey, and like we talked about like weaponizing, it was almost like, wait a minute, how dare you?
Yes.
And we're seeing this across the country. How dare you, Black man, tell me to put a leash on my dog, even if it is the right thing to do. You as a Black person shouldn't be even allowed to tell me. So now I'm going to punish you. And the reason we wanted to start with the Amy Cooper conversation is because what her intention was the result of the George Floyd situation. That's how easily these type of situations can take a turn. So just to kind of quick summarize for those who, I mean, you must be living under a rock if you don't know what's going on with the George Floyd situation. George Floyd went to a restaurant establishment. There was an alleged counterfeit $20 bill or something along those lines. It's never been confirmed whether it was or what was the situation there. The cops were called. George Floyd, from the videotape that I've seen on several news outlets, never was resisting arrest. And then by the time there were 4 officers that had him down. One officer in particular, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing his last name right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Derek Chauvin. Is that right? Thumbs up.
Javon.
Javon.
No,
Yes.
Javon.
Javon. Is that how we're saying it? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Derek Chauvin was seen when the video went viral. It's almost an 8-minute or a 9-minute video of him putting his knee with his hands in his pocket, placing his knee on the neck of George Floyd. And then you have onlookers, both white and black, telling him, hey, he's choking. He's saying, I can't breathe. And the guy's just saying, he's just kind of looking on and staring at them as George Floyd subsequently loses consciousness, and I believe dies right there on the spot. Now they saying that that's not what happened, but that's what I saw, because his body went limp when paramedics came and actually turned him over. But you have 4 officers, three other officers. 2 were holding him down, and I believe another one, which is an Asian officer, was kind of guarding watch. So Natalie, when you saw something like that, I mean, having your experience with being a former attorney of the Trayvon Martin situation, are you like, hey, here we go again? Because they're telling us, hey, just comply. That's always been the standard. Just comply, don't resist arrest. And now Sandra Bland, now George Floyd, now they're coming into our homes. Now they're, so what was your initial reaction to the George Floyd situation when you saw the video? Or your breakdown?
Before she says it, also Noel Carter here in Orange County.
Yeah.
That was a very.
I was going to get to that when we spoke about Windermere and the sheriff that put out a statement today and why. Yeah. But we'll talk about that. Yes, with Noel Carter. Yes.
Okay. And Terry Johnson, who I have a trial with coming up in July 6th. But when I saw this video, once again, the word that comes up is disgust, and the word that comes up is the lack of humanity. That, and the power play, because that's what that was. It was, you see him smirking at this crowd who's beseeching him to let this man just sit up. It wouldn't have hurt him to just let him sit up, but it was a power play, and it was a position that we have allowed police officers to take. And it is this power that I have the power to do whatever I want, regardless of your rights and regardless of what harm it makes to you. And I want to make a clarification though. When I say police officers, people think I'm speaking of an individual. I'm speaking of a government entity that is allowed to take your life and liberty. That's how we have to think about police officers. It's not the individual person. It is the government entity that has the right, and it's the only government entity that has the legal right to take your life and your liberty. So they must be put in check, and they must be scrutinized. And that's why it's so important. When you have this, you have to just keep reminding people that that is what America is based on. The fact that the people rule the government doesn't rule the people. And human rights are important. So yeah, once again, I just thought, this is disgusting, and it happens every day. And I hope that we don't reduce this to, and as much as, and as important as George Floyd is, and Derek Chauvin are, we don't reduce this to them, because this is happening every day in American society, in every state, in every city. And we have to talk about it in that holistic aspect when we're talking about police brutality or police abuse of citizens.
No, I definitely agree. Kamara, what right, like for instance, when I saw the other officers, right, and the other officers weren't charged. It was only Derek Chauvin or whatever his last name is. They were called Derek C. They were only charged. They have a right to defend him at that point. Am I wrong? Am I right?
I'm sorry, let me just say your question. They have a right to defend
The
who?
other officers, once they see that this guy is losing consciousness, asking for help, saying he can't breathe, they have a right and a duty as officers at that point in time to defend George Floyd in that situation.
Yeah, so before we get to that, to go walk a little back, in 2016, and I know we'll probably get to this, but activists in 2016, they actually changed the laws in Minneapolis, which forced the cops, if they, or with law enforcement, if they saw one of their colleagues operating, you know, with brutality or just excessive force, and they don't step in or stop, then they will be deemed, you know, responsible or, you know, fired. And so so people ask, like, what is the point of activism? That is the point of activism.
Absolutely.
So yes, they have the responsibility to stop. They had the responsibility to stop the murder of this gentleman, and you know, it was unfortunate because they sat there and they laid on the code blue rather than laying on their humanity. And I think that was the hardest part to watch, right? When you're watching people, you know, just ignore their own humanity because they were adhering to a code of not, you know, of not, whether or not getting involved or whatnot. I don't know what was going on through their mind, but, you know, I think all of us had an internal thought of, we had been there. You know, I know I've talked to my friends with all my professional titles and everything like that. And if that had happened to me, I was watching that, I wouldn't just be recording. I would probably have to be like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to jail today because I'm about to bum rush this officer because he's not about to take someone's life.
And I think, I think that is the dilemma that we're put in, because I'm thinking the same thing. If I'm telling you to stop, right? So now I have to go and I would be charged with a felony or put my life in danger in order to save someone else's life, because at that point in time, you put your hands on that cop, they could shoot you. Now you're dead.
Right.
That's the dilemma that we're being put in.
That's the dilemma where we have to balance our lives with with our humanity, because somebody's not adhering to what they're obligated to do based on the laws that have been written in that particular jurisdiction. And that is the thing that you saw, two things where they happened. They were violating the law and were violating humanity being above and the law being second. And it was just so disturbing on so many levels. It was a voyeurism too, because you had a number of people watching with the video.
Yeah.
And it was just like, we're in a society where we're watching these things happen. And I couldn't even finish watching it. It was like a snuff video for me. I couldn't finish watching it when he was writhing on the ground and saying, I can't breathe. I just like, I can't watch this. Well, I don't want to watch this.
Natalie, and you spoke to a problem, and I know this because of all the work in Orlando with the police citizen review boards, and you know how these police unions have influence over the policies and how they are safe harboring a lot of these white supremacists that have infiltrated, and this is not my conjecture, this is actual document, white supremacists have infiltrated law enforcement agencies. And so I wanted to talk with you, Andrew, because here's an officer who's had a history of file complaints on him, Derek C. He's had a history of complaints. Let me go ahead and he's actually shot. Hold on, give me 1 second to read this. Here we go. He's had file complaints. He shot in 2008. He shot another unarmed black man who was 21. He's had several file complaints. This is not against policy to even use that type of maneuver, or I guess your technique of restraining someone. So how do we get these police unions? Yes, police should have unions, but how do we get them from influencing policy so much that lives are being, are being lost?
Well, should they have unions?
You don't believe they should?
No. Who are they unionizing against? Most people, when you have unions, you're unionizing against a corporation to protect your wages, to protect those things. When we have police unions, who are they unionizing against? They're a government agency. So who are they unionizing against?
And like I said, you're right. And they are influencing policy. And I think that's kind of the hesitation into arresting some of these officers, because if that's Alan or myself, and we did that to a cop, or we did that to a white person, we're going to jail that night, if not shot.
Well, so, I am a big proponent of unions, but in the instance of a government entity, the person that they're unionizing against is the people. That's anti-democracy. It's anti-democratic. It is not what the our American liberties is built on.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your take, Andrew?
So I know I already have a short list of deputies that, as sheriff, this is still a right to work state. And there is no actual union at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, okay? There are deputies that, so through discovery, when you have, when I worked at the Public Defender's Office and now as a private criminal defense attorney, when you go through discovery, you request an officer's internal affairs file. And they're also public record in Florida, as long as it's not an ongoing investigation. So, I mean, I had a deputy in one of my cases who swore he was coming to court. The only charge was a resisting without arrest or resisting without violence, because the person stopped an individual and said his tag didn't match the car and tried to get his license and all that other stuff. And the person in the car said, here's my registration. Go check. That's what you said the problem is. Go check. And my guy ended up getting arrested, got his car towed, all of that. And then, magically that individual didn't have his body cam on that time. And I mean, we're talking a year ago, like we're not talking a long time ago. Yeah. And the state attorney was like, listen, the officer really wants to go forward. I said, okay. So we set it for trial. And officer backed out the day before. And I shared with the state attorney his internal affairs file. It's 18 pages.
Wow.
18 pages. And he still has a job. That's unacceptable.
I've run in that too, Andrew. So I can certainly verify that. There are certain officers that are in the same cases over and over and over again.
Across the country, not just in Minnesota, not just here in Orlando, across the country.
Exactly. And so, and even when you hear that they're fired, they get hired by another agency. So that's a farce too.
And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about when it comes to, little white lies, no pun intended, right? Is that people think that justice is, someone lost their job because they were caught being, we're playing this gotcha game, right? It's almost like racism whack-a-mole. Like if you've been to Chuck E. Cheese, they're popping their heads up, we catch one, we shame them, they lose their job, and we think, okay, that's it, it's done. But like Natalie said, they're going to be hired by another agency. They're going to go get another job somewhere, or
unless they lose their law enforcement license.
Correct. I'm talking also Amy Cooper as well in this situation. And in some cases, some of these white supremacist groups raise money. So they're profiting off of their police misconduct and police brutality. I do want to switch gears to
can I just say something, TJ?
Go ahead,
I want to congratulate the Color of Change. That's an organization, it's a national organization. In this Minnesota case, when there were GoFundMe pages set up for Derek Trayvon, they petitioned GoFundMe to take down all of those pages, and GoFundMe did.
That's great.
Wow.
We need to cut off the money supply when these cases happen.
And I think a lot of time that gets lost in the movement is the economics of it all. You got to hit people in the wallet. I see the University of Minnesota has disassociated themselves from Minnesota, the police department in Minneapolis, where this officer worked. So they said, you're no longer going to be at our football games and stuff. So that's a huge contract. And I think for our activists that are watching, it's not, everything has to work together for its good. And I talked about that today in Windermere. but we have to make sure that we're hitting these folks in the wallet and cutting off, no pun intended, their air supply or their financial backing. I do want to talk about the reaction to George Floyd via social media. Everybody's had something to say, including the president, who said that he was going to have a federal investigation. Peter, I want to ask you, how much responsibility do you think President Donald Trump has to things, to incidents like Amy Cooper and officers like, because this officer was a supporter of his? Do you feel like he has some responsibility based upon his rhetoric? Is he inciting? Do you feel like he's inciting more and more of these incidents to occur?
No, and I'll tell you why. I think that when we talk about, I talked about it in my show this morning.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things that happens, and I think Natalie mentioned about the group out in Minnesota cutting off the light strings, because if you guys would see the emails I have, because I register to everybody's email, the Black Caucus, the Congress, everybody's doing fundraisers with this, guys. And I'm seeing this stuff come down, and I'm sitting here like, okay, so Trump said something stupid, like he did today, or through Twitter. He says something stupid.
Like he does all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go
is it
there.
Stupid? But wait, is it stupid or is it dangerous?
I think
stupid kind of dismisses it, kind of downplays it a little bit, doesn't it?
It's
I agree with
dangerous.
that.
You can look at whichever way you want to, you can play it. Like I said,
okay.
If it's dangerous, it's dangerous. It's it is that fine line that you have between things he says, things he acts on, and at the same time, when we're talking about him, the first thing that they did, which, I was shocked, I didn't expect that from him, and maybe you guys agree or don't agree with it, was him putting the Department of Justice and getting this thing moving. Because to me, the amount of time that it took from the actual incident to today to arrest this gentleman, I don't know. Again, it goes back to my questions. I'm learning from you guys, and I appreciate you guys a bunch right now. But when I hear things like it took, the attorney from the county in Minnesota or Minneapolis say, well, we have enough evidence to go ahead and do a third degree or whatever. I'm like, what? You had that 3 days ago. That's not something that just happened. The videos didn't just come about. And yesterday, when I believe it was the FBI came out and other groups that came out, that they did that, I think they were supposed to be out like at 4 o'clock. They didn't come out till 6 o'clock. I think they were trying to arrest the guy. I mean, that's just my opinion on what they were trying to do, to come out and say, this guy's arrested, because right now, Minnesota's burning, everything that was happening. We got to figure this thing out, and we got to figure it out now. When I see, like I said, that he did something like that, it could be positive, it could be negative. And then he says something like this, which I say is stupid. You say it's dangerous. It could be both. It could trigger, like I think Camara said it well. There are words that'll trigger, right? There are words and
dog
things,
whistles.
right? Dog whistles, right? So those are the kind of things that we all have to be aware of, and that we all have to be careful about, because, I find myself too, a lot of people, like I was reading, I don't know Camara personally, but I was reading some of his Facebook, and some of the things he was saying about, the looting.
We're friends?
What's
We're
that?
Friends?
No, we're not, but we will
friends.
be after this. I promise you.
Oh, okay.
No, he's talking about the surveillance that we have on your you're on the list, Kamara.
Well, you're on the list, Kamara. And so before I got on here, I said, let me check on Natalie. Let me check on all these folks and see.
Everybody checks on me.
Yeah.
But it was all good. I was like, oh, okay. So when one of the biggest issues we have, TJ, and your board that's here, and your team, we've lost the decency, the total decency of humanity in what happened here with Floyd. Okay. To me, I didn't look at this just as a black man. I mean, he was black. We know what happened. But I was sitting there watching, and just like Camara, I couldn't watch it, because I was like watching this Asian police officer, and I hate to use, but it is. He was standing there and not moving, and watching everybody. And who else was filming this, by the way? Because I'm sure there's more than one video. So like you said, TJ, I wouldn't have tolerated the guy, after what I learned this week on my radio show, had 2 sheriffs talking to me. And one of the biggest things they shared with me, I said, Peter, listen, we learned, I said, how's that technique about putting your neck, somebody's knee on somebody's neck? They said, that's not anywhere near what training happens. Okay.
No.
So the guy's on the floor. Number one, the danger is the sheriffs were telling me is the guy's already laying on the floor with handcuffs on his back. He can't breathe because his chest, there's no way of picking himself up. So he can't literally breathe. Forget about his knee on his neck. So I'm like, so that wasn't really meant, for what it is. He said they could have handcuffed him, sat him up, which is the right thing to do. And that way then talk him through whatever they had to talk through. But no, this guy intentionally knows that they can't breathe and he murdered him. So when I'm sitting here listening, and then of course, you can get folks from both sides of the aisle. You can get folks, even African-Americans that are out there provoking things that I'm like, guys, this is me speaking as a Hispanic, as a Puerto Rican, as a person who's lived in Florida for 40 plus years, from New York. I'm like, something's got to give here. I mean, this has been an awakening for us. And if we want to nitpick about words that are being said, and if we want to start doing that kind of stuff, that's not going to get us anywhere. That's, to me, the bigger picture is like yourself, TJ, these attorneys that are here. This is something that we just can't go out there. I think the biggest confusion people have, especially in the Latino community, is they hear the Black population constantly protesting and screaming and yelling and all that, but they don't understand your plight. They don't understand where you've been and what you're still going through, right? Because you're still living it. So for them to sit here and start using that, because I have to deal with this all the time in the Latino community, I'm like, you don't understand because you're not them. So don't try to put yourself, we have our own issues.
Well, Peter, you
Go ahead, Natalie.
There's a lot of Afro-Latinos that do understand, because I have a lot of friends who understand completely. In this day and age where we have Google and where we have the internet, I have no tolerance for people who don't understand because the history is there. So,
and I think we're over explaining our plight. I think at least I am. I'm over the fact of I have to have the responsibility to educate you about my Blackness, to educate you about my right to exist as a human being, right? So I think I'm over that.
And on top of it, when we say something's got to give, that usually connotates Black people have to give. We've given and given. And that's why we're still being killed. So I think that at this point, it is on the majority society who allows this conduct and who turns a blind eye to this conduct. It's on them to give.
Yeah. Well, to me, go ahead, Kamara. I wanted to make let me say this real quick, and then you may have something to say. When Donald Trump, when he went on his Twitter and he said that, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't give a shit when he came on and said, "Oh, we're gonna open up an investigation, we're gonna do all that stuff," because I really feel like, and this is me, I feel like the reason he did that is because he's trying to coattail that Black male vote. Right,
and that's what he always does. So he also sends the dog whistle of "if you're looting, you're shooting." That comes from 1957 in Miami. That was there was a police chief in Miami that used that phrase, and that phrase was to counter Black civil rights protesters. He basically told them that it was to shut down the young teenage civil rights protesters. He basically told them, if you protest and it gets out of hand, you're shooting. If you're protesting, we're shooting you.
Yeah.
And that Donald Trump uses specific words. These are not accidental words. He knows exactly what words. So as he's giving, and this is, he plays both ends. So yes, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call the Justice Department, but I'm also going to give this dog whistle to police officers who know the history and of what that means. If you're looting, you're shooting.
And oftentimes
to you, to control.
I'll let Kamar go. Go ahead, Kamar.
No, go finish your thought, and I'll.
No, what I was going to say, and then I'm gonna go to Kamar, and then I'm gonna go to Alan, because I want to talk about the protests / riots and where people stand on the spectrum. What I wanted to say was Donald Trump, like you said, coded language. When he capitalizes thugs. Thugs is the equivalent in a white supremacist code for nigger. That is what it is, right? And so when he says that, we may not know, or you may say, oh, he just said thugs to the blind eye, but they all know, his supporters, they know what that means. And white people are never classified historically as looters. Never. So that is a term that is designated in class to classify Black people who have civil unrest.
And on an island, that doesn't matter. But when we're talking about leadership, and I know leadership, I was a naval officer for 9 years. So when we're talking about leadership, everything trickles down from the leader. So when you have a leader that doesn't know how to lead or doesn't include everyone else, all of that trickles down. So yeah, he is a problem. He's a problem to society. He has given people permission to be inhumane, to not care about other people. He has made this so that, and I'm not saying that he created it, because he certainly didn't create it. It's been here. Correct. But he has given it air and wind, and everyone should be offended by that.
Correct. Come on.
Okay. So there's a number of things. With Trump, he didn't create hate, but he amplifies it, right? And that's one of the things that we have to be careful of. That's why I don't like to. I've long been past the point of where he said, "Oh, he's stupid." When he goes, "Oh, he's stupid," I'm like, "He's not stupid." All right, he acts stupid, but he's very poignant on his language and his verbiage.
Cerebral.
So, yeah,
he's calculated.
He may not be the most articulate person, but he's not stupid to understand the difference between that, right? Or he has people around him like Stephen Miller who tells him certain phrasing and words, say, you might put this in this tweet or whatnot, or in your speech, right? But they're specific, right? And he's done it so consistently that I refuse to believe that it keeps hitting on these marks of where, one time is an accident, twice is, three times is like, okay, it's now you're trying to create an entire stream of consistency, right? But I want to go back to the concept of Black people explaining themselves. I told some friends earlier this week, I personally get tired and weary of being the Black pain whisperer. Like I get tired of that sometimes. I get tired of telling people who don't look like me or don't understand my culture, well, this is why things are messed up, And one of the things I thought was fairly poignant when I started seeing a lot of, white Facebook friends, is consistent. We're saying, you know what, that Colin Kaepernick thing, I had a different opinion, but now I see it. And it was like, at one point I was like, all right, that's cool. But then it was kind of, it like pissed me off a little bit, right? Because it was like, like we were talking to her blue in the face. We're literally telling you this is why he was protesting. And I'm not trying to earmark Colin Kaepernick as some holier than thou person, because I have some opinions about how he's operated, but I believed in what he was talking about, right? And more importantly, I believe in the subject matter. And when people dismiss the subject matter and parlayed it into something of selfishness and to other subjects of, non-patriotic, being unpatriotic, it irritated the hell out of me and especially a lot of Black folks. Because it's like when we talk to you about our pain, us explaining our pain to you is deemed unpatriotic. And it took something to where a Black man was murdered on video camera 4 years later for you to be like, damn, I was wrong. That is.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to say that, I don't expect anybody to care about my pain or my emotions. What I expect them to do is respect the law. So I think that Martin Luther King said it best when he said that you cannot regulate the heart, and that's not what I'm trying to do, but you can legislate the heartless. And that's what laws are for. And that's why we need laws to protect. When you have someone who's dying on the street and being killed by a government agent, that's what it's all about. all this emotional stuff, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I don't care if you care about my pain or not.
Yeah, we can't continue to try to appeal to morality to people that that don't have any.
Right. So now all I want to do is this. I want to have the same rights as anyone else. So we need to make sure, and that's what this is about. It is about the law. It is about making sure everyone has equal access to the law.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, because there's been a lot, and Peter, you touched on it, and I want to get everybody's thoughts on this. There's been a conversation lately about the right to protest and how to protest and everything that's been going on in Minnesota. Some people call them riots, some people call them patriots, some people call it just, civil unrest. Alan, what is your thoughts on the images that you've seen? And are these people, are they justified in their actions as far as how they protested in Minnesota? Or do they need to? Are they given the civil rights movement and they're halting progress, as some people may believe? You're muted.
They absolutely have the right to do what they're doing. I think history has shown us, not even civil rights history, just American soil history, that nothing has gotten done without pushback, without a little violence. There's two things that America respects: is violence and economic impact. With looting, you get a little bit of both. You get a little bit of violence, and fortunately, a lot of times it's not with human. It didn't look like, at least with Minnesota, but it was violence against property, and America respects property. They respect property more than they respected Black people for a very long time, and still to this day. So that is when the antennas go up, right? You have people who, like Kamara said, they didn't understand and they didn't like the way that Kaepernick was protesting. And we're just using Kaepernick as a broader example of peaceful protest, right? We've done peaceful protests. We saw peaceful protests end up in us being hosed. They used to sick dogs on us during peaceful protests. So we can't act like we have not exhausted all options from the civil rights movement to currently right now. So you have to hit them in a place where their antennas flare up. I think a lot of times what people don't see is what's happening isn't just completely unhinged rebellion, unorganized things. I saw video of where the people took a lot of the items that were being looted from Target. They set up a center to have some of the protesters come and get some goods, come and get some water, come and get some cleaning supplies. They don't see the humanity the next day where you do have people out there cleaning up certain areas. They don't see the humanity where there are people who, if you are entrenched in the community and people who are armed, they will come out and they will protect your business so that your business is not affected during these things. So that's the community side that a lot of people don't take into consideration, because they just want you to think that it's just unorganized chaos. No, it's very tactical. And unfortunately, these are the things that have to happen to get people's attention. You can even look on your Facebook feed and see how many people spoke today about, even if they agree with it or they don't agree with it, the riots got their attention, even if George Floyd didn't get their attention. What does that really say?
Yeah.
Well, I want to say, number one, that first of all, we don't know who those looters were. We don't know if they were a part of the organized protest. In every protest, and I do a lot of protests and I do a lot of organizing. In every protest or every organized civil action, you will have infiltrators, you will have agitators, you will have people
arsonists
who are there with other agendas. So that doesn't, it really bothers me when people lump everyone there with the same. Not everyone has the same agenda or the same plan for that. When we talk about the civil rights era, there were many legislative changes that came out of the civil rights era from peaceful protest. So I don't think that, I don't think that we should excuse actions that are against the law and against or against moral law. So I don't think that we excuse those actions, but at the same time, in not excusing those actions, you cannot ignore what caused the protest in the first place and excuse that. So these are two different things, but at the same time, I don't want us to fall into the trap where we're saying, oh, it's okay to loot. Oh, it's okay to do this type of stuff. No, that is not what we are about. That's not the society I want to live in. That's not the society I'm sure you want to live in.
Yeah.
We want to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we're not. You're absolutely right, but I also think too, like nobody wants any of this, right? I think it's always a cause and effect. So, like you said, if we don't want the effect to be rioting and looting, then what we really need to focus on is the actual cause of all that.
Okay, we totally agree there.
What I want to say is these protests happen because this is a protest because they were trying to initiate justice, right? We weren't even in the judicial game. We was just like, hey, we want to suit up and play. And they were like, no, like, we're not going to do, we don't, like Peter, you said earlier that the DA said, he said, oh, we don't have enough evidence. And so this responsibility falls on the leadership in Minnesota. Like, you allowed these things to happen because you thought you rather maintain and safe harbor a white supremacist murdering ex-cop than to have this idea to say, you know what, we are going to give into the idea of equality to the judicial process.
TJ, I have a question for you, for the panel. Go
ahead.
You just said something, but so let's go back to when this whole happened, okay?
Mm-hmm.
George is there. We know he's dead now.
Mm-hmm.
They come in, the news says they fired all these police officers. Now, what would have been the difference had on that evening that they fired those officers, they put them all in line and they all walk them to jail? And they all put them in jail, all four of the officers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Would the protest look different?
I believe so.
Now, that's just the question I'm making.
Well, I can tell you from evidence that I know so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was a part of Trayvon Martin. I was a part of all of those protests. Guess what? When George Zimmerman was put in jail, the protest stopped.
Yep.
The protest was about arrest George Zimmerman.
Yes.
So yes, I do think it would have made a difference.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go to Kamar, then I'm gonna go to Andrew. Go ahead, Kamar.
Well, a lot of people don't understand too the vein of that protest, of the protest, not only especially in Minneapolis, was you have to think about the history of law enforcement within that city. A lot of people don't understand that city was a hotspot among other cities. It was like a top 10 hotspot for police brutality and just excessive force. There's actually data about that. And so that community, that community was dealing with pent-up anger of people, law enforcement taking advantage of it. And what you saw was the end result of pent-up anger of people, expressing their frustration, going all the way back to, our possible vice president, candidate, Senator Amy Klobuchar, right? Mm-hmm. Who ignored, actually built a career on prosecuting Black defendants and giving and recommending higher sentences and ignoring law enforcement excessive force activities, and didn't want to go against officers. So there is a long history for them, especially within the last 10, 15 years, of people in that community saying, you know what, enough is enough. And they got tired. And when that happened, you saw the top come off and they were exhibiting a frustration. So yes, I do believe it would have stopped. People had done the perp walk all the way to the police station. Mm-hmm. But you also have to understand there was still this temper within the system. It didn't matter what was going to happen. The wrong thing happened and it just popped up. And that's what people saw. And that's what people are failing to recognize and understand, And so I don't get mad at the victim for lashing out. I get mad at the person who caused that victim's, to lash out. I don't get mad at the victim. You can't get mad at who,
We can't be, you can't tell people how to deal with their own trauma. Now, you may not deal with it that way. Like Natalie said, you may not lewd, you may not go out there and smash or do whatever. But if somebody else is doing that, who am I to tell them? Because like what Alan said and stuff, there were alternatives. People try to, I protest too. I do marches and organize as well. It's exhausting when you're trying to do the right thing. It's like you keep going on this checklist of things you can do to achieve justice. And once you keep checking these things off and you don't get the end result, you're like, I'm backed into a corner. This is what we're left. I do want to get Andrew's.
So 10 seconds. So TJ, to your point, imagine being in 2016, being an activist and changing the law to prevent this to happen. And it still happened.
Correct.
And you're like, you know what? Burn it off.
We changed the social media policy.
I'm tired.
We forced the social media policy to be changed in with OPD when the Shellhorn, where Officer Robert Shellhorn started calling Black people useless savages and athletes useless savages and thugs and all this other the same coded language and out here patrolling. Yet still, they're still doing those type of things. They're still doing that, and no one's punishing them. Andrew, you're trying to be sheriff. You want to be sheriff. Where do we draw the line? How do you handle a situation like this? What's your, do you have a book, a folder where it's like, hey, that's marked red in case of emergency? What happens under your leadership?
The leadership is the actual answer in this case. It takes not just strong leadership, but I fundamentally believe that you cannot have a career law enforcement officer change the foundation of the criminal justice system. You're just not going to get that change. There are, out of 1,700 sworn officers at the sheriff's office, I promise you there are more than 50 of them that have at least 10-page IA files.
Right.
At least 10-page IA file.
Explain what an IA file is to
That's an internal affairs file. Yeah. It's going to be when there's some sort of complaint. And here's a bigger problem in law enforcement is not every complaint is one, taken seriously, or two, formally documented. So a complaint has to reach a certain level, or it has to be, we'll say, complained to the right person in order for it to be taken seriously, in order for there to be an investigation. And here's the actual reason why law enforcement why the good cops don't go after the bad cops, okay? Because in Florida, there is a law enforcement officer and correctional officer bill of rights.
Right.
That is very, very express on how you must conduct an investigation into an officer or a correctional officer. Some of those things include, and it's state statute, it's 112.532. It's the Florida statute 112.532. And some of those things are, you have to interview that officer when it's convenient for them, basically on their shift at their station, where they are basically in their own home, in their own environment, right? That's where they work. That's where they go every day. That's where they know everybody. The other thing, you have to present them with the statements of the people that are making statements against them. In the interview, in that initial concept, you have to provide it. So if another officer is the one giving the statement against their fellow officer, that officer that the statement is against is going to see who it's from the moment they're made aware of the investigation, of the allegation. And the Florida Supreme Court, in a case from Orange County, it's Sheriff Demings versus the Civilian Review Board, they have upheld that the Law Enforcement and Correctional Officer Bill of Rights is the sole method for adjudicating complaints against officers that essentially don't rise to a level of a crime, or that initially don't appear to rise to the level of a crime. The way that you fix this is, it's not zero tolerance policies, okay? Zero tolerance policies are a trap, okay?
Okay.
When what you do is you put a policy in place, a very clear policy. If you do X, Y, or Z, so for example, when the young lady from Westridge, when that officer yanked her hair back, that's quick, that's easy. Even career law enforcement officers are like, I don't know about that. But when you have somebody who comes in who doesn't have the baggage of 20 plus years of being a law enforcement officer and being loyal to the blue, I promise you, my loyalty is to the people of Orange County. My loyalty is to the community that we are supposed to serve. Law enforcement is a service industry. These are, oh, protect and serve, but everybody focuses on protect. You are a service industry first. That is what you are. You serve the community. And it's going to take leadership from somebody outside of law enforcement to fix that.
Okay. Yo, I concur, man. I concur. I do want to talk to Peter. When we talked about the protests and the riots, we had celebrities like Steve Carell, Seth Rogen, even Colin Kaepernick, who I know you've been critical of, they're going to pay if the demonstrators get arrested, they're going to pay their bonds. What are your thoughts about that?
Go have at it. If they're going to pay for their, I agree.
Have your views changed on Cap since this situation?
No, not at all. And Cap's issue, listen, I want to go back to what Camara was saying. Cap's issue with me, Camara, sorry. What his issue with me, when I say me, what my own personal issue thing, because I think his point was missed completely and was taken from what he's standing for, which was the abuse of power by the police, to the American flag. The whole shift happened where I'm going to kneel down and I'm not going to respect, when the point was missed. In my opinion, the point was missed.
Was it missed, or was it misconstrued purposely?
No, it was no, because come on now, TJ, the media knows how to control all this. Okay. So just as bad as they can be, or as good as they can be, they could at least said this, they're changing the point of view. This has nothing to do with the flag. It has everything to do with abuse of power in the police. So when the media has that kind of power and they're not using it for that, then, because I've seen them do some other things. So I think that they took his stuff out of context. If we're going to stick to Colin for a minute and say his issue of talking about police brutality, he's absolutely right.
Okay.
There's no question about that. But again, the story to me, and the story that was painted through the NFL, through whoever, the list goes on and on and on and on as to what really was not the issue. And I think that when we allow that to happen, that's the dangerous point, is what we're like, we just missed the whole point. The whole point, and I think, just by speaking in this panel here, we learned that his point was not about the flag.
No, it wasn't. He's actually said that several times throughout this entire ordeal, and
it wasn't going to work. Why? Because the pressure of even the media pushing that narrative. They weren't pushing the narrative of the police brutality, were they? No, because they were like, they wanted to see a football game and see next Sunday who's going to kneel down. That's what was happening. Yeah. It wasn't a focus on what he was trying to bring. That it changed. And
so
going back,
you're saying
is that there's a lot of people people want to.
Cap had a branding problem, Peter. Huh?
What's that?
You're saying Cap had a branding.
He had a branding problem, yes, because they basically took his story and they shifted it really quick to say, okay, let's focus on this because it's all about disrespecting the veterans, disrespecting our country, disrespecting so many people. When the fact is, he was trying to bring a point. But that point was never brought out that way, because it was brought out as, I'm a rebel, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm not going to kneel to a flag.
It was 7.5 years. I spent 7.5 years in the Army. The actual kneeling, the recommendation to kneel was from a United States Army Special Forces soldier, because kneeling is not disrespectful, whereas sitting your butt on a bench during the national anthem is disrespectful. So like his actual protest came from somebody who, like, those of us that have, he was a special forces guy, which is, for those of us in the Army, like, those are special forces, the SEALs, the Force Recon, like, those are the dudes, like, those are the guys. And if they're the ones saying it, like, I don't care, some out of shape backwoods person talking about that's disrespectful, like, go join the military. Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
But can I say this?
Go ahead, please.
The concept that you know, he had a branding problem, I think it's a bit unfair to him. I do think he had opportunities to take control of the conversation, and I think he did not. But we have to be careful about putting the onus on him for branding, because you had people, very powerful people, who had a objective to cancel out his voice, who were working with a bigger initiative to make sure that their players were not going to get out of line, and they were going to make him an example of, listen, we're not going to have him, you know, create this movement where these players think they can start, you know, bring out their social issues on the field. It's about the shield, it's about the game, and it's about the jersey. It ain't about the name on the back of the jersey, the name on the front of the jersey. And you had owners with connections to media conglomerates, you know, who said, listen, we are creating the narrative. So when you have billionaire people going against a millionaire person or 100,000 person or whatever, guess who's going to win that battle? When you have people who have a concerted effort to ensure a docile response to social justice, right? And they're going to make sure that they're keeping their boys in play. Guess who's going to win that? And then when you have somebody who's running the country, who's patronizing this incredibly dangerous narrative of, you know, he doesn't love America and is unpatriotic to kneel.
Or to say, get that son of a bitch out, to get that son of a bitch out of here.
Son of a bitch. So we have to be careful about branding.
Yeah.
Because
the reason I brought the cap situation is, and I want to ask you this, Natalie, the reason I brought the cap situation up is there's this conversation about there should be this decency. Like, when is it, you know, when are we this decency with protesting or fighting for justice? Like, that's, you know, where do people get off? It's almost like, yo, you're telling me how to get justice. Like, there's this conversation that's going on that I really feel like it has no merit. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, anytime we talk about protest, it's so funny because people want a peaceful protest. Well, a peaceful protest is walking around in a circle, right? So
no, they want to, not peaceful.
Protest is
peaceful, and they want peaceful and convenient.
Right. So, you know, what we ask for is nonviolent protest. That there's a difference. Then no one should. There's a saying in protest world that if everybody ain't sleeping, nobody sleeps. So that's what we strive for. So, you know, I think that the message there gets turned around from what protest is about. Throughout history, protest has been about revolution. Sometimes there are rebellions that come out of those revolutions. If you want change, and which is what is happening, people want change and they're demanding change. Now, where I think that we get kind of lost is when we get into the divisions. When you divide this person by this person by this person and this type and this type and this type, instead of saying everybody's welcome to the protest party. Everybody's welcome to be a part of this and to protest this injustice, because we recognize that we are all interconnected as humans. So anything that affects me will eventually affect you. And what we are seeing now, those cause and effects, anything that affects a poor person, they don't get food to eat. Guess what? They're going to commit crimes to get food to eat. And it's
as people have been doing because of the pandemic. There have been people, and who knows, to Alan's point, who knows why people were looting or whatever, for whatever reason. There's some people that have
but I'm not saying that I still excuse, but you don't excuse it. You just understand that there's
that's exactly. It's not excusing it. It's like, hey, you don't know someone's individual circumstances, situation.
TJ, I don't need a 70-inch TV. Okay, if I need food and water, that's one thing. Okay, but when you see people looting major appliances, things like that's to me. That's looting. That's stealing. That is
stealing. And I 100% agree with you.
And Natalie, I'll use a good example, TJ. Puerto Rico, do you remember the protests against the governor of Puerto Rico? Which
I do.
When everything happened, right? Yes. So you had when they say peaceful protests, they were out there making noise. It was crazy. Millions of people down in San Juan protesting. But then, like, I think it was Natalie that said, but you don't know who's in that group. And then all of a sudden, within that group, they started throwing gas bombs. They started breaking windows. They started destroying. And then you started saying, wait a minute. Now they're going to bunch these people all up together when there were people there from all parties. They weren't there like Democrat, Republican. They were there as the people saying, enough's enough. And so when you got that group, like I saw the protest in Minnesota and watched it. And I was like, hey, they got every right to do and scream and yell, burn a car, I guess. I don't know. But when I saw the other stuff, that's where I kind of like, I saw it in Puerto Rico. That's why I'm saying, I was like, that's not part of the protest. That's part of someone coming in from somewhere else and taking advantage of a situation that really shouldn't be taken care of. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if you guys heard, but isn't the mayor of Minneapolis put a curfew at 8 o'clock this evening?
I'm not sure. I didn't see that.
Before I got on, there was a curfew starting this evening till 6 in the morning because a lot of the business people there, even the locals, were like, we don't know what's going to happen next. And the best thing is to control. I don't know how you guys feel about that either. I'm not crazy about curfews.
Well, what I'm saying though, Peter, is that I get what you're saying. I'm saying that there's a cause and effect. So at the same time, just because there's looters doesn't mean that it should stop the protest.
No, in a lot of these places, I know it's unfortunate, but I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little cold-hearted, but some of these places, they got insurance. Target got insurance.
I don't think that, because if it was your property, I don't think you would feel that way. I think that what I'm saying is that we cannot excuse the looting. We cannot excuse the rioting. We should not fall into that trap of saying either or, because this is not an either or situation. This is a situation where we can stand up for right and we can support the protesters, and we can also say, hey, looting is wrong. The most effective protests are where you get the community involved, where the community goes out, and I promise you'll see this tonight. You'll see some protesters protecting those businesses. Because that's what organized protest is about, getting the community on your side. It's not about being mad and angry. It's about collaboration and getting people together.
Well, today, go ahead, Alan. Go ahead. Touch on that.
For sure. I mean, I think that, like I said, I don't think the people who are really interested in making a change are solution based. So ideally, you would have these centers set up where you have people protecting the local businesses, you have people peacefully marching, and then in the background, you have people working on the actual legislature and things to bring to the hall in the morning, to continue these conversations.
Change policies, yes.
But I just think that I think a lot of times, and I think it just comes to the conversation as far as being divisive, a lot of times people reject the conversation about condemning looting because they don't want externally for others to look at us as being divisive. So even though, yes, internally we're like, man, this doesn't help anything, but it's like, we'll deal with y'all later because we have something bigger to deal with right now. So
that's saying like they're staying on message. They're trying to stay on message rather than.
Yeah, so that's why I think a little bit now, especially more nowadays, it's not that they're saying, yo, go ahead, do your thing. Looting is great. It's just that, okay, we are here because of this Black life that we can't get back. The little things that, like TVs and stuff, like I don't want to talk about how hurt AutoZone is right now because George died.
And I understand that. And you will never hear me say anything about that because it's a distraction. I understand that is a cause and effect. So if you want that to stop, then we need to address the effect. But I will never excuse it. And that's the trap that we need not fall into. Sure. Because we are asking for a condemnation of both. We're asking for that to stop and the cause of it to stop.
Yeah. Well, there was go ahead, Alan, go ahead.
And that's but that's the beautiful thing. That's like two different conversations, right? Like as far as the reasoning for it to stop, we bring those to the legislator, we bring those to the state.
They can be done simultaneously. It doesn't have to be two different conversations.
Well, I'm saying as far as how that happens, but I'm talking about the way that we protest and the things that we can fix. I think that's an internal community conversation, right?
Mm.
And so as opposed to the legislature conversation, which ends up going through a different route. And then we have our team meetings internally to say, this is how we can be better as a community and more tight knit to, make things better going forward, to make sure our house is in order.
When you say our house, what do you mean?
Our house just as a people.
Are you saying
Black folks?
As black people, yeah, or a community if nothing else.
Okay, yeah. So I think community, because once again, I reject the idea that this is our problem. This is a community problem.
Yeah,
and that's how we must. We are all a part of this community. George Floyd dies, it affects everyone, as we have seen. We're seeing it today. It affects the business people, it affects everybody, it affects the people who have to watch it. So it should,
but it's not always like that. And I think that's the root of some of the problem. It's not always like that.
Maybe people don't always recognize it. It is always like that, though. Maybe there are some who purposely don't try to recognize it, but it is always like that.
Yeah, it should affect everyone, but it always seems like when these tragedies happen, Black people always got to be at the forefront of finding their own justice, and then the other communities, right, are kind of like, yeah, go ahead. But anytime something happens in other communities, Black people are right there. We're in the front lines. So I think there is a bit of a disconnect. I agree. It should be important to everyone, but I think the frustrations, particularly with the youth or the people that are seeing these things happen and play out on the grassroots level, is that when these things happen and they happen to our communities or Black people, it seems like we got to be we helping others and we got to fight for ourselves. So it becomes exhausting, which leads to the frustration that's spilled out into the streets as far as the protests. And I wanted to talk about the protest that happened in Windermere today. So it was leaked, and I got tons of text messages this morning where it was leaked that Derek, the ex-cop who's been arrested now for the murder of George Floyd, right? He has property in Windermere, and I didn't know that. And so I waited until I found out if it was actually true or not. So we didn't know if he was there. On the grassroots, here's what was said, and I want everybody, I did a live, and shout out to everybody that watched the live today. Thank you for doing that. What was said was, no one was paying attention to it, and this is directed to Andrew. Until the sheriff's department made a statement and said, oh, don't worry, he's not here. We just want to make sure that everything's good with the community. And I'm paraphrasing them, of course. They just said, well, he's not here, and we want to let you guys know that Central Florida is safe, Orange County is safe. Everybody on the grassroots level said that was the moment that it was a red flag to say, we gonna find out for ourselves, because they did not trust Orange County's leadership and what they were actually saying. Because they felt like currently the chief, John Mina, they felt like it's a possibility if that guy's here in Florida that he would assist or safe harbor him if he was there to assist him. That comes from, and if you want to look at my live, that's not my conjecture. That came from directly, and we're talking about diverse, we're talking about Latinos, white folks travel from Oviedo. Everybody seemed to be on message when they thought, wait a minute, this leadership in Orange County can't be trusted. So my question to you, Andrew, is how do you want this job? How do we build that community, that trust? Because a statement from the sheriff's department telling people not to panic caused panic and concern.
So for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the people of Orange County, they don't distrust Sheriff Mina because they don't know who he is or because he's some random law enforcement officer. They don't trust Sheriff Mina because they know him. They're familiar with him. They know his games. So when that came out, and I'll tell you guys here, I actually got text messages from a realtor on Wednesday that said, hey, this is from the property, from Rick Singh's website, the Orange County property appraiser. And he lives here. Like, he's close. And I went out there today, not in my role as a candidate for sheriff. Like I went out there today as a lawyer to observe, just to watch, to make sure that nothing crazy happens. So Sheriff Mina was out there. I don't think too many people saw him. But
Sheriff he Mina must have missed me. Because I had to go. I was there for an hour and a half.
He was in his Tahoe rolling around. I tried to walk up to the Tahoe and he drove off, but whatever. I saw the undersheriff. And the other thing too, that when we talk, I know Natalie, you talked earlier about when protest happens, there are people in the protest. Like there were at least 3 deputies that I know to be deputies who were in plain clothes.
Yeah.
Who were with their masks.
Yes, they were. I spotted some too.
Yeah, who were walking around whenever the protest moved, whenever there was, there were a couple times where residents from the neighborhood came out and they were just live streaming, but they weren't there to support the movement or support the protest. They were just live streaming basically as a way to say, hey friends, this is happening in my neighborhood. And there were some heated exchanges, just, why are you out here if you're not supporting us, from the protesters. And then the folks that live here, they're like I live here.
Yeah.
And there were times, and that was actually what gave away the third one that I didn't notice at first, was I noticed every time there was a little bit of conflict, they very nonchalantly move over in that direction. And they're real close, 3 or 4 steps away. And listen, when you cannot take at face value what an elected official says, let alone an elected law enforcement official, it's time for them to go. There's no other way around that.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you, TJ. I want to thank you because, I got home and I live like a half a mile away from that place.
I didn't know that.
Thank you for bringing the helicopters. I'm like, I need some peace in my house. I didn't need helicopters hovering over my house. For the
I saw your post where you said, okay, go away. He got arrested.
Go away. Let us sleep already, okay? The guy's not there. He's gone. I mean, it was like, but I agree, Drew. We're in a place where, it's really, really sad, or a sad statement that our law enforcement is not trusted.
Right.
That they are not trusted. That they put up, because I thought, honestly, I said, hey, the sheriff has to speak. Someone's got to say that this guy's not here. Because, and even with him saying that,
nobody believed him.
There was people driving up, and I'm like,
I'm telling you, it was
crazy. It was crazy.
I laughed because it was so, everyone, I asked a diverse group of people, they said, well, why did you come here? They were like, oh, the statement. I was like, well, they said the statement wasn't here. And then when I got there, they said, well, there's someone moving in the house. This was before the arrest actually happened. So, so people were like, hey, we're just going to sit out here. They started getting supplies. People were ready to set up camp. I will say this, and I want to talk about this, my experience. I've never encountered, let's put it, I've never encountered officers who talk to me with such dignity and respect than when I was in Windermere. I was like, we're protesting, and they're just like, I had an officer ask me, could I please just scoot over to the sidewalk, please? We're with you, just scoot over a little bit. And I literally turned, it's on video, I turned around because I didn't think the officer was talking to me. I thought it was, but for the people in Windermere, they're like, yeah, that's the normal reg. So it just shows you the difference in policing from the Windermere area to the 32805 area over here on the west side of town, because it would have never, I've done protests over on this side. It doesn't go down like that. Another thing that was that stood out to me was when we first got there, when I arrived, and shout out to Miles and some of the other Orlando activists that were out there who came to assist.
Hey, Miles.
There was Windermere people, a lot of high school students were out there first. And God bless their heart. They were protested as much as they didn't have the blueprint. It's as much of an oppressed Windermere high school kid can protest. They just were like, hey, I gotta make
that's my wife's school. Be careful there.
No, what I'm saying is, it's like, hey, how do we protest? Like, okay, I know I got my sign out here. I know I'm standing here, but they didn't know what the next step was. So as the West Side activists, I'll say, came over and kind of integrated, and everybody kind of integrated, it was a teachable moment for the other activists or advocates of justice, I would say, to participate, for them to actually experience, listen, and hear what we were saying from the other side of town as to what they need to do. And it speaks to what Alan was saying about how everything works together. If you don't protest in the street, that's fine. You can be a legal observer. You can be someone who's on Twitter and starting Twitter campaigns. You can be the person who's calling the district attorney's office. All of it works together for his good. So it's kind of like you need all hands on deck with these type of in these type of situations. I do want to talk about the actual charge before we wrap up. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? And I know, and I just realized about the whole Minnesota law compared to the Florida law attorneys that I have here. So we'll do the best that we can. But I'm gonna go around the horn. I'm gonna start with Natalie. Your initial thoughts of just one officer being arrested and charged with the third degree murder charge, and the other three officers not yet charged. We'll say, what was your initial thoughts when you heard that? Okay, he finally was arrested.
I was like, okay, good. He should be arrested. So, I think for the listeners to know, and like you said, that every state has different laws. So these are different laws than in Florida. In Minnesota, they have first degree murder, second degree murder, third degree murder. This officer was charged with third degree murder. He was charged with third degree murder because it takes out the intent part. The first and second degree murder, you have to have premeditation and intent. The second degree murder, you have to have intent. So that it got rid of the intent part, and it's saying third degree murder is a depraved heart. It is you did something with disregard to the person and what could happen to the person. And you did it because you just have a depraved heart. You're just a mean, person or whatever. So what happened with Philando Castile, did I say his name? Philando Castile?
Philando Castile, yes.
Yeah, that officer was charged with second degree murder. Second degree murder, once again, is intent. And as we all know, the jury, he was found he was acquitted. The interview with the jurors afterwards said that he was acquitted because of the way that the law was written for second degree murder. They could not find that this officer intended to do it. They thought their officer was culpably negligent in doing it, but they didn't find that he purposely intended to kill Philando Castile. So I think that they fixed that by looking at the law. And I actually do think this is the proper charge for this officer in this situation. Well, I think you'll get a conviction with this charge.
Yeah, come on, go ahead.
The only thing I have a question about that is Muhammad Noor, who killed, a woman while in active duty accidentally, and he was convicted on a second degree murder. And they admitted that it was an accidental, but there was no video. It was no corroborating, testimony stating that he was intentional, but he still was found guilty on second degree murder. And we know the optics of it, right? It was a black man killing a white woman, although she wasn't American, she was an Australian tourist. Those are the things, and that just was his last year. His conviction, that trial went on, and he was convicted in 2019. I think the murder happened in 2018, 2017, but they finally had the trial in 2019. He was convicted. So, I'm sorry, no, you know what? He was brought on second degree murder charges, and he was convicted on the third degree.
Okay.
That's what he was convicted on the third degree. That is where I wonder if you're going to bring this second degree charge, what's to stop them from convicting him on the convicting Charbonneau on the third degree?
So And I think, Camara, I think when you're talking about intent, most intent crimes, you cannot, a lesser included can never be, and I think Drew can talk to this too. When you have an intent crime such as murder, intentional homicide, a lesser crime cannot be a negligence crime. So that becomes the issue. So here they charged this officer with murder 3 and manslaughter. So they got the lesser in there also. I believe if they would have charged him with murder 2, they could not have gotten the lessers in. So, and I'm not sure because I'm not well versed, but I know that is what happens in Florida. I'm not sure what happens in Minnesota. So you either intended to kill someone, which is, you know, you meant to do it, or you did it recklessly and willfully and wantonly.
So let's parse through that though, right? Let's parse through that because I agree, right? I understand, you know, including the lesser included and the language and why it was important to charge.
I don't think lay people kind of are following us now. You and I.
Yeah, we're trying. We're struggling, but we're trying. I got my pencil and everything. We're trying. We got it.
So the question I have, and this is just more or less, I guess we're having a law school discussion here, is arguing the term of intent, right? Because we look at the history of this particular officer, and he had 17 prior incidents,
17.
Right? 17 prior incidents. He had, two of those incidents on separate occasions involved discharging a firearm and one person actually dying. You look at the procedure that was done, there's nothing in that particular department that illustrates putting their knee on somebody's neck to hold them down. That is not a procedure, right? And so just like in any murder charge, you look at the surrounding circumstances to build up an intentional act. And I question, I agree. I understand it's a safe charge. Third degree, it's a safe charge. Manslaughter, it's a safe charge. But I question the consideration of looking at the surrounding circumstances of this particular individual and the factors outlaying and understanding everything involved in it. Could there have been an argument for intent?
I think there was, but I think that this, and I think that they made the decision to charge a crime where if a jury came back that it was not murder, they must come back with manslaughter. So I think what they did was they ensured a conviction with this charge.
And this is punishable up to 25 years.
And Drew, you go ahead.
Yeah. So the actual Minnesota statute for murder in the third degree is 609.195. And it says, so section B is, it involves if somebody dies if you sell them drugs. Section A is whoever without intent to affect the death of any person causes the death of another by perpetrating an act eminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life is guilty of murder in the third degree and may be sentenced in a prison for not more than 25 years. So the reason I don't think they went with intent is because I don't know Minnesota rules of evidence, but his history as an officer isn't coming in unless he tries to say he's an amazing officer and never had any problems.
So they're not even going to know. That's not even going to go into, no, it's going to be a factor into the trial.
No, and so that's one of there's often a huge disconnect between people who work as prosecutors, as public defenders, as criminal defense attorneys, and sort of the general public writ large of the nuance of a trial. And what will and will not be presented to the jury. The jury is only authorized to make decisions, make their verdict based on what they see at trial. They are very specifically instructed not to look at anything outside, whether they do or not. Listen, that's a whole nother separate show. But they're not to look at anything outside, no articles, no newspapers, no Facebook, no anything. So only what is presented and admitted into evidence at trial is what they're allowed to go off of.
Well, let me ask you guys. Go ahead.
I was saying, like, with this, can we as just regular folks say there looks like some intent here? Yes. And if you look at his history, absolutely. But that's just not going to get in front of a jury. And then afterwards, people aren't going to understand that nuance, and they're going to think the jury had all of that information, and they just didn't. And that's why juries come to decisions oftentimes that we don't agree with, is they don't have all the information. And a good defense attorney, even when it is for a law enforcement officer, a good defense attorney is going to keep out everything that they can.
Yeah.
Well,
why not? Let me ask
a question for the panel, because this is an interesting conversation.
Go ahead.
The county attorney, the one that actually came out today, spoke about the arrest. In that conversation, when he said third degree and I think of manslaughter, he mentioned that, you know, that they had enough evidence to convict them on that 3 on the so, you know, and he used again, he brought back the point, which was I believe brought up, of the other murder issue that happened a couple of years ago. He's saying, using that same pattern, we can convict this person on this. So as attorneys, do you guys see that for real?
I see it.
Deal? Okay.
I see
From
it.
what you just read, that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm sure Alan and everybody, like, you know, us people who are lay people, like, we want to know, why not just why not arrest all of them at the same time? Why wait? Why do this?
There's a very tactical reason, because so once you arrest, you have 175 days to charge in a felony. You have 90 days to charge in a misdemeanor once you make the arrest. So if there is actually more information available, if the district attorney actually has to go through other body cams, other civilian cell phone videos, police reports, because here's the other thing too, it's very possible that when they wrote their police report, that's not exactly what happened. So
I'm sure it's more than likely.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm sure a lot of us have seen multiple instances where the officer says this person aggressively resisted by yanking their arm and doing all these things. And it was literally the person turned to say, huh? Like, what happened? And so it's the officer's perception of what happens and what they put on paper can actually be used against them once it all processes through. So it can be used to impeach them, to challenge their credibility, to do a whole bunch of things. Or to charge them
with writing a false police report.
Right.
That has happened in cases. So
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that there are underlying issues that might be, you know, germinating right now, that the district attorney is thinking about is, you know, writing a false police report, or strategic, as Andrew stated, that, you know, strategically getting the big fish and the big tree to fall first, and then allowing everything else, the atmosphere to adjust, and showing that, listen, we can build a case over here, you know.
And then
Go ahead, Natalie.
And then it depends on the laws that are there. Once again, we don't know Minnesota law, so I don't know what those other officers could be charged with. So, you know, one of the things that came out was the autopsy. The autopsy said that he did not die. George Floyd did not die of asphyxiation. So he did
Which I think is BS, by the way.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, but that's the evidence that the jury will get.
Well, can't they get an independent someone to do an independent autopsy?
And knowing Ben, he will get an independent autopsy.
Yeah, that's all. Like Ben Crump, like, come on.
Yeah, Ben's gonna get one. I already know that.
So guys, so what was the autopsy saying then, if he didn't die of that? Because I didn't get that piece.
He died of cardiac arrest.
Right, essentially.
Probably because he wasn't breathing.
Yeah.
Hello. Wow.
Well, let me say,
is that more of like a chicken or the egg type of conversation when you're talking about the autopsy? Is that what we're talking about?
Say again. I'm sorry.
Is that more of like the chicken or the egg type of conversation when they talk about, okay, he had the cardiac arrest?
And I want to clarify. I want to clarify what I said, because I don't know if they didn't say he didn't die of lack of oxygen. They said he did not die from strangulation. So there's a difference.
Oh, okay.
Right. In fact, the statement as it reads is, the autopsy revealed physical findings that support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. Mr. Floyd had underlying health conditions, including coronary artery disease, hypertensive heart disease, the combined effects of Mr. Floyd being restrained by the police. His underlying health conditions and any potential intoxicants in his system likely contributed to his death. So they're saying that there was a contribution of possibly drugs within the system, his health condition, and then the circumstances. But they're saying that it wasn't solely based off of the incident that happened with the officers putting their knee on his neck. Now, one can argue
that. I think they're saying that that was a contributing cause of him having a cardiac arrest or anything.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying, it was not solely based off of him. It was not solely based off of the officer's actions. It was other things that happened within his system with the drugs and his health condition. I think we're saying the same thing, Natalie.
Yeah.
Real different. We're saying a little bit different, but that's okay.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to show this because Alan, I just got the clip that you sent me. I want everybody to take a look at it. What is the first clip that you sent me of who's talking? This lady on CNN?
I forgot her official position, but she's with the state of Minneapolis.
Yes. So and then I'm going to ask you guys before we wrap up and do the moral of the story. I want to ask you if would this have any bearing in the trial? Give me 1 second here to share the screen. Okay.
So did Officer Chauvin. It was really interesting that right across the street from where Allie is standing is a restaurant called El Nuevo Rodeo. George Floyd worked at that restaurant. So did Officer Chauvin. They were both bouncers at that restaurant for 17 years. So Officer Chauvin, he knew George. They were co-workers for a very long time. You know,
I don't know if that's true.
Well, that came from her title is city official.
Many people are on television. Donald Trump's title is president.
I've actually seen that on different places that, he was, because I get that restaurant was a nightclub, and like they said, he was the primary bouncer during the African American night or Black night, of that club. And they don't know if they ever interacted, but they know that the officer did private, off-duty work.
Off-duty
and I read that the officer did work there. I'm saying I don't know if it's true that they worked there at the same time or together. I don't.
Well, she said 17 years. That's why I was like.
No, but George was moved from, I believe it was Texas.
Yes, he did.
So he's only been in Minnesota for like a few years because he got a job.
Yeah.
So they don't know each other. I know that the cop worked there for 17 years, according to what they said, as an off-duty police officer.
So is this a case of a city official not just grasping at straws because she don't know what to say on CNN?
It's a case of the media putting stuff on the news without verifying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Listen, guys, thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you being on this panel and breaking this down in your individual expertise. As you guys know, on my podcast, on our podcast, we have something called the moral of the story, which is basically your way of how to summarize this conversation, put a bow on it, your chance to plug your social media, and it's your chance to say what you got to say to the viewers watching. We had a lot of folks on our live stream who have been watching and commenting. Bless your heart, Joe. He's been with us the entire time making comments. So I'm going to start with Alan because Alan, you're familiar with the process. You know how to do it. What's your moral of the story? Man, the moral of the story is actually a little message. Everyone just kind of protect your peace. There's going to be a lot of images, a lot of videos, a lot of information, a lot of things to filter out. It's okay if you have to take a break. It's okay if you have to do something to keep your mind a little bit sane. So the moral of the story is protect your peace, protect your sanity.
Amen.
Absolutely. Peter, what's your moral of the story?
Listen, to me, the moral of this story is to keep an open mind to everything that's going on. This panel has been amazing, TJ. I've learned a lot from them and I appreciate them. But I've also learned a lot about myself and the fact that, even though I've got my own thing going in the Latino community with our show, and I'm going to plug it, Sin Miedo, con Peter Vivaldi, Monday through Friday, 9 to 10. And I'm gonna call out a couple of you guys to bring you on my show because it's
Wait, say it again. I want to make sure that everybody got it. Say it again.
Sin miedo, which is without fear. So we speak our mind like what you do here, but we speak the truth. We don't come with any. We do everything we can, and so this issue, even though it is, African American, issue, it was not. I will tell you that the amount of calls that we received on our show, it's just amazing to hear the people's comments and how aggravated and how angry they were for the police brutality. So I would tell you that I've learned so much, but I think the biggest moral here is that we're all human beings and we're not animals. And what we saw on that video was not humane. It was completely, in my opinion, it was completely out of line for any human being to see someone going through that. I don't care who they are, and not even have the decency or the humanity to help this person. And to me, I just don't even have words. And I hope that all these other officers get brought to justice as well, because there's no way that this just could be let go. And we're going to have to just keep a sharp eye on what's going on. And again, thank you for having me on your show. And these attorneys, man, you guys blow me away. Thank you so much for letting me just sit in and listen. Appreciate it.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, no problem. Kamara, what's your moral of the story?
Just stay engaged, stay active, don't be discouraged. And you are the voice within your circle, your individual circle. So, you shouldn't ever feel like you have to be silent, whether that circle is in social media or your friends or your coworkers or whatnot. If you have a thought and you know right from wrong, don't be afraid to voice that. And don't be afraid to be engaged within what's happening around you, because sticking your head in sand doesn't make the water go away.
Appreciate that. Andrew Darling, attorney Andrew Darling, candidate Andrew Darling.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at Reform Sheriff, right? Just Reform Sheriff. It should tell you something about the state of law enforcement and the history of this country when Reform Sheriff, the domain, the social media handles, and everything is available. Okay. What the moral of this story is the only way that you get fundamental change in our criminal justice system is by changing the inputs of the system. Law enforcement is the foundation of criminal justice. I am capable, I am qualified, and I am ready to lead the Orange County Sheriff's Office into reform. There is no other candidate that is ready to do that. We're able to do that. That's going to come from me, and that's going to come from the community. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity to speak. TJ, I appreciate it, man. Natalie, Kamara, I mean, listen, this has been phenomenal. Peter, thank you guys so much. I am incredibly honored to be here and be a part of this conversation, and I'm ready to lead Orange County into the future.
Right, appreciate that. And also, just a quick tidbit. There are elections coming up in August. What's the date? It's
August 18th right is the day of the primary.
See, that was the test. That was my first test for the candidate to make sure he knows when the day of the election. Yes, August 18th. So, and there's other races, which I'm sure Natalie's going to let us know about as well. So, Natalie, what's your moral of the story?
My moral of the story is freedom ain't free. So you have to look, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and it affects everyone. So if one person ain't free, nobody free. And
where can they find you on social media? Plug your website, any of that kind of stuff?
My website is Natalie Jackson Law. My social media is NatJack Tweets. Really, I just need your support for a trial. We have a police excessive force trial coming up where my client, Terry Johnson, was beat up by the police. He was a homeless guy that was taunted and beat up. It was all over the media. If you see the video, it's disgusting.
Yes.
But we do have a trial on that. So I'd appreciate everyone's prayers and support. And I want to say this panel is awesome. Thank you all for allowing me to join you and for us to be able to exchange ideas and flesh this out. This is really what America is about. And at the unity, we can't divide. We must unite. Division, the more we divide, the less power we have.
Yeah, I agree. And let me know anything I can do to help with that situation. We got to rally the troops.
You always do.
I'm I'm ready to rock. And I do want to talk about, yes, I do want to talk about that because my moral of the story is going to be a little different. Today I saw, because I went to bed and then I woke up and I saw the image of the CNN reporter that was arrested while covering. And I think, as someone who is an activist who has transitioned more into the media space as a journalist, I felt a sense of duty, and it was different this time because usually when there's a protest, I feel a duty to be a part of it, to be the one that's out there chanting and protesting and organizing. But this time it was a little different. This time I felt a sense of duty to make sure that the story and the narrative was told correctly, and to see that reporter who is a Black man be arrested for doing his job so that he can give so basically he can report and give the story to the people so that they can make their own assumptions on what's going on. I felt today that I had a duty to do so in my own community. So that's why I went to Windermere. I went there so that this community can also set a standard, but also make sure that they can speak their truth. West 2 News was out there, Fox, News 13, all the media outlets were out there. But as far as independent Black media outlets, I was out there, and it made me proud to cover it as an independent Black media source. The Soapboxx, and I got my hats off to Alan and Jesse and Javonni and Ishna, who are my other co-hosts, my female co-hosts, and Alan, who has stuck with me since day one, as we are fastly approaching our 1-year anniversary of the Soapboxx, as we have had a long road. And I think today, having that sense of responsibility, I really am comfortable with the decision that I've made as far as building this career, building this platform, and I will continue to do so and serve in that capacity as both warrior and king. So appreciate y'all. Thank you all for being here on the Soapboxx podcast. For Peter, for Attorney-Natalie Jackson, for candidate Andrew Darling, for Camara Williams, for Peter. Thank you all so much. Did I forget anybody? I think I said Peter twice. Did I say? For Alan. I did say Alan. I did say Alan. Did I say Alan?
Yes. I didn't see you say Alan.
Yes, for Alan York. This is the Soapboxx podcast. Appreciate y'all. Make sure you follow us, Soapboxx podcast with 2X on Instagram. Like our page on Facebook. Support independent Black media or independent media in general. So appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you. Peace.
Bye.